Welcome to Any Good, and today we're going to review A Quiet Place Part 2 starring Emily Blunt and Cillian Murphy. And that actually reminds me, I don't think I've ever told the story of that time I met Cillian Murphy. So one day I was just... Shh. Oh, because A Quiet Place, like, shh, right? Shh. Oh, right, you just want me to get on with the review. Okay, we'll come back to that later.
I don't know why he came all the way up here. There's nothing left.
Now that the world is slowly getting back to normal, let's dive right back into apocalypse nightmare times with A Quiet Place Part 2, this time with double the shushes. Shh. It seems like we've been in a sort of horror renaissance the last few years, and certainly a film that helped confirm that was A Quiet Place back in 2018, and it definitely excelled because of its interesting concept, which was fun, albeit a bit flawed, where basically the monsters could only operate using their sense of hearing, and thus we had to all stay quiet, which was a fun gimmick. Now, when it comes to horror sequels, you always hope that they kind of go deeper and explore the world and some of the new concepts and ideas. And when A Quiet Place Part 2 does this, it is very fascinating and interesting. But frustratingly, it doesn't fully commit to the concept and as a result can feel a little bit samey. I liked but didn't love the first Quiet Place. I thought people held it maybe in a higher regard than it actually deserved. I do think we got some interesting ideas out of the whole premise, but I also feel like that premise led to a prevalence in jump scares, and that kind of undercut the sincerity of the whole thing. Now, on the other hand, I do think that the sound, or the lack thereof, led to some really good scenes with some real haunting atmosphere, and certainly the small budget gave the film a bit of an intensity and allowed for a good performance and chemistry. I mean, then again, Emily Blunt and John Krasinski are married, so if they didn't have chemistry, it'd be sort of worrying. I should say, I don't think you can talk about this film, Part 2, without spoiling Part 1. So, if you haven't seen it, maybe don't go any further in this video, but I will say both of these films are certainly worth checking out at the very least. So, go do that, or stick around, because I'm going to spoil the first film now. Not right now. This is your final warning. Go away if you don't want a film from 2018 spoiled, because I'm going to spoil it next. The first film ended with John Krasinski sacrificing himself for the rest of his family, and with Emily Blunt having given birth to another child. Now, their daughter, played by Millicent Simmonds, is deaf, and as such, all of the family speaks sign language, which is of course very important to them and very helpful to them in this scenario. But they also vitally learned that putting her cochlear implant next to a microphone creates a frequency that disorientates the monsters, making them easier to kill. All of these plot points are picked up on in the second film, and as such, it really validates the film being called Part 2. With this film, we pick up with the family looking for new survivors and a new place to live, and on their journey, they find someone who they knew before this whole alien invasion, which, yeah, if you didn't know, those things are aliens. I don't think it was very obvious in the first one. It's very obvious here. These things came from outer space. I guess that explains how they all kind of look like Venom. I don't know, but anyway. We see in a flashback scene that this person was actually a family friend. That's the character of Emmett, played by Cillian Murphy. And as we see, he's become very reluctant and withdrawn to engage with others after he's lost his own family, and he doesn't want to give them any shelter. But as they rest up with him temporarily, Reagan, the Millicent Simmonds character, hears a message on the radio which she thinks might point to more survivors and possibly somewhere safe to live. So yeah, we have the dynamic of a father who's lost a family and a family who's lost a father coming together. And while that will be interesting, the film doesn't really do anything with that or explore it or engage with it on an emotional level. And that's not made easy by the fact that they then take the Scooby-Doo approach.
Let's split up and see if we can find this mysterious ghost from space.
With some decidedly mixed results, in my opinion. And it's not that all the plot threads aren't somewhat interesting. They all have their moments. It's just that one plot thread is way more interesting than all the rest of them, and because of that, I kind of got bored when we weren't focusing on that one, and which is, large chunks of the movie. But just to give you a bit of an overview, Cillian Murphy's character ends up with Millicent, and they basically go out looking for a new safe haven. It basically becomes The Last of Us. Emily Blunt's character of Evelyn goes out looking for medical supplies, and that leaves Noah Jupe's character of Marcus to look after the newborn baby. A teenage boy minding a baby? I bet that leads to some wacky hilarity. No. It's A Quiet Place Part 2. It's silent and sad. Now, to be fair, them looking for a safe haven is the main focus of the film, which is good because the other two plot threads are a little bit mundane in comparison. I mean, what I wanted out of a sequel to A Quiet Place was that they would explore this horrible world a bit more and the people that inhabit it. And disappointing to me then was that really only that one plot thread dealt with that. Whereas the other plot threads just felt a tad predictable and redundant. It just felt like something we'd already seen in the first film. Now, I'm not saying there's not good stuff in each section. In fact, there's some really good tense scenes in the other two plot threads. It's just that they felt very samey, not just in that they were the same in the context of this film, but they just felt like the first film again. It's stay quiet, the monster is near, which is obviously the basis of the film, but it just kind of felt stale here, especially when you juxtapose it against them kind of leaving the confines that they've created, exploring this world. And because of that, that felt a lot fresher and more exciting. And as a result, I felt like those two plot threads were kind of a bummer and left me a little bit bored and wanting more. I don't know, maybe I'm criticising the film for not being what I wanted it to be. I just feel like there was potential here to do a bit more. And as much as the film can feel a little bit samey at times, there is some stuff in here that works really well. Firstly, the performances. I mean, Emily Blunt once again is really good in the film. The kids' performances, though, are excellent throughout. I mean, you can't often say that about films with full confidence, but I can say that here, and it's a real credit to the likes of Noah Jupe and Millicent Simmons that they can hang with actors the calibre of Emily Blunt and Cillian Murphy, who, honestly, Cillian Murphy, I mean, would you expect any less? He's brilliant in this. He's really good. He's a great addition to this world and to this story, and gives an excellent performance, and probably is my favourite character in the film. And did I tell you about that time I met him, right? So, shh, we'll come back to it. The film has some amazing sound design, as you would expect. It's very impressive and well thought out. The budget is a lot bigger this time, but it never felt kind of out of place or unwarranted. It just meant that we got a lot bigger action scenes that really blew the first film scenes out of the water, in my opinion. We start off with a sort of day one flashback to when the aliens landed, which was amazing. Honestly, it kicks the film off in high gear, but it had the effect of really being the peak of the monster scenes and never really getting back there again. But there is still some other great scenes in there. There's an excellent tense scene where they run to some survivors at the docks, which is a little bit frustrating because I would have loved to have seen more scenes like that where we sort of see what society has become and how people have sort of adapted for better or worse. And A Quiet Place Part 2 sort of flirts with that idea but never goes all in on it. I just feel like the film could have done more with the whole other survivors idea. I mean, they run into some bad survivors and it's just kind of there to remind us that our heroes are still good. There's some good survivors there, but we don't really get much of them. And honestly, the film very frustratingly wastes completely a really good actor. I just feels like they didn't really know what to do with the idea of more survivors, or maybe they wanted to explore it in another film. It just feels like the film would have benefited from mixing things up a little bit. I feel like I'm kind of done with the whole monsters aspect of this world. And honestly, it meant that I was kind of a bit uninvested when the monsters were actually on screen at all. And when they weren't on screen, I was a lot more interested. In many ways, the story just kind of felt like more of the same. And while a few times it kind of made an effort to get outside its comfort zone, it then sort of retreated back to the more familiar format. And I also should say the film just ends. It like really abruptly just ends, making it very clear that there's many more parts to come. And certainly there's a lot of ground left to cover and more things to explore because they didn't do much of that here, unfortunately. As critical as I am about A Quiet Place Part 2, I can also be pretty complimentary towards it. I mean, both of these films they're a cut above most mainstream horror films going at the moment. And while they're not perfect, they have enough redeeming qualities and scenes to certainly be worth a watch. And while I don't think this one knocked it out of the park, I mean, it basically just bunted and then sat in its arse, it's at least a worthy follow-up and left me excited for what the sequels hold. Right, so I'm at work, okay? And I hear this guy behind me say, hey. So I turn around and he says, oh, come on, man, that's just rude. I guess I'll tell this story when A Quiet Place Part 3 comes out.